Transmite en su canal de frecuencia modulada estereofónica multiplex La Voz Radio, desde New Haven, Connecticut, al mundo.
Hello, welcome to La Voz Hispana CT.com. You're listening to WNHH 103.5 FM via downtown New Haven. Y quiero recordarle que ustedes están escuchando a WNHH 103.5 FM desde downtown New Haven. Hoy tenemos con nosotros somebody that's very, very dear and special to me. And I also would like to introduce, my name is Norma Rodríguez-Reyes, your host in K-PASA, and my co-host, Jose Candelario.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Jose, and this is K-PASA, and we're looking forward to one of the biggest interviews. I'm sweating already. This is the biggest interview I've had so far with a great community leader here.
Thank you. Well, we have with us today Bozie Kimber, and he's an American Baptist minister and civil rights activist, and he's the pastor of the First Calvary Baptist Church in New Haven and Hartford, Connecticut.
Yeah, Kimber has been described as one of the most powerful players within the Black community. Local Kimber is president emeritus of the Greater New Haven Clergy Association, a consultant to the Office of Multicultural Affairs and Multicultural Center of Southern Connecticut University, a fire commissioner of the city of New Haven, director of AIDS Interfaith Network, an advisor to local labor unions, and a member of Omega Psi Phi. He serves nationally on the Reverend Al Sharpton's National Action Network, the Conference of National Black Churches, and executive director of the Social Justice Initiative, and has been quoted as saying, "We must speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, for those who are disenfranchised. We must have a voice." And that was in reference to Trayvon Martin, but that kind of applies to everything, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yes, and I guess ahora en español, ¿verdad que sí?
Sí.
This is going to be because it's kind of bilingual, you know, in English and in Spanish, so that we can hit both audiences, okay? Kimber ha sido descrito como uno de los jugadores poderosos dentro de la comunidad afroamericana a nivel local. Kimber es presidente emérito de la Asociación de Clérigos de Greater New Haven, consultor de la Oficina de Asuntos Multicultural y en el Centro Multicultural de la Universidad Estatal de Southern Connecticut State University. Él nació en Phoenix City, Alabama. ¿Ok? Bueno, y yo creo que para mí la primera pregunta que yo quiero preguntarle a Kimber es, de todos los sitios que Kimber pudo haber escogido después de salir de Alabama, ¿por qué New Haven? From all those places that you could have chosen to come and live, why New Haven, Connecticut?
Well, I started, when I left Alabama, graduated from high school, I went to Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was a minister when I went there. And when I graduated from there, I was able to pastor 2 different churches in 2 different locations in North Carolina. And I was called to a church here, to Connecticut. I never knew anything about Connecticut. And when
wait, I gotta translate.
Oh,
And I'm not
I'm
gonna
sorry.
remember all that. I'm gonna fake it.
I'm sorry.
Bueno, cuando él se fue de Alabama, en ese tiempo él era ministro y estaba siendo pastor de 2 diferentes iglesias. Pero entonces lo llamaron a que viniera a ser pastor en Connecticut.
Thank you.
So I want to go back further.
Okay.
I mean, here it says, began at preaching at the age of 15.
Empezó a predicar a la edad de 15 años.
Yeah, I started at the age of 15. At the age of 16, I pastored my first church. And that church was in Opelika, Alabama.
Dice, a los 16 años empezó en su primera iglesia como pastor en Alabama.
And I always wanted to be a voice for those who could not speak for themselves, those who were disenfranchised.
Siempre quise ser la voz para esas personas que no pueden hablar por sí mismos, las personas que se encuentran
Sin voz.
sin voz.
Sin voz en la comunidad, sí.
Eso mismo.
So I've always been a lover of civil rights. I have been with every civil rights leader but Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Yo siempre he sido amante de los derechos civiles y he estado con todo líder que tiene que ver con derechos civiles excepto Martin Luther King.
Growing up in a little town called Salem, Alabama, where the governor of the state was George Wallace. And if you know any history about George Wallace, you would know that the blacks in the state of Alabama was in slavery because they did not have the opportunity that others had.
Se crió en la época de George Wallace en Alabama y bajo de ese gobernador la gente de color sufrieron mucho sin tener los derechos de otras gentes.
Y estaban bajo esclavitud.
Eso que dice, bajo la esclavitud moderno.
Yes.
So that's where my journey began. Went to an all black school until the schools were segregated in the fourth grade. That's when we were bused about 25 miles a day to a white school.
Wow. Él se crió en un sistema de educación que estaba segregada y tenía que coger un bus 25 millas para atender su escuela.
Sí, así que los primeros 4 años de la escuela, era solamente para afroamericanos. Pero entonces vino el periodo de segregar las escuelas y tuvo que ir 25 millas, para ir a una escuela blanca.
People have to know your story before they begin to judge you. And why are you doing what you do? There is always a reason why I do what I do.
La gente tiene que conocer y saber tu historia para que ellos sepan por qué es que uno hace lo que uno hace, por qué yo hago lo que yo hago.
So, my people did not ask to come to America.
Mi gente no pidieron venir a América.
We were kings and queens in Africa.
En África, nosotros éramos reyes y reinas.
And so when they brought us here in the hub of ships,
cuando nos trajeron aquí en esclavitud en los bajos de los barcos,
many of my ancestors died before they could ever set foot on the shores of these United States of America.
So muchos de mis antepasantes, murieron antes de poder poner sus pies aquí en América. En esos barcos se murieron.
That leads to me the relationship between blacks and Hispanics.
Eso quiere decir sobre la relación que vamos a entrar entre los afroamericanos y los hispanos.
One group was brought here without their will.
Un grupo fue traído aquí sin su voluntad.
Can I interrupt real quick, Rosie? I'm gonna the late great Paul Mooney would say in one of his stand-up routines is that the Caribbean folks are no different than the folks here. It's just we got dropped off before here because we were involved in that slave trade also.
You were involved in the slave trade, but the history of the slave trade talks more about Africa and our ancestors than it does about any other group coming to America.
Explica lo que tú dijiste y yo entonces.
El comediante Paul Mooney en su comedia describió que nosotros como antillanos siempre pensamos que somos mejor pero la realidad somos esclavos que llegamos aquí en América antes de llegar a Norteamérica, que los caribeños fueron los primeros. Can you repeat the last thing you said? So,
we were as blacks brought to America, and there were more emphasis on us working to build America than any other ethnicity group.
Él dice que que en la historia lo que la gente se enfoca es los africanos que trajeron aquí para establecer este país. Como lo encontramos hoy. Y nosotros usamos los esclavos para poner la fundación de los Estados Unidos de América.
So, it raises the question.
Hace la pregunta.
Why can't the people who were brought here without their own will get along together?
Porque la pregunta es cómo la gente que lo trajeron aquí sin querer, ahora mismo no podemos trabajar juntos.
So we're in this fight together.
So estamos en la pelea juntos.
And we look at leaders of the black community.
Y miramos a los líderes de la comunidad afroamericana.
But who are the leaders of the Hispanic community?
Pues, ¿quién son los líderes de la comunidad hispana?
There is this divide in our city.
Hay una división en nuestra ciudad.
And even in our country.
Y también en nuestra nación.
Whites have made us become enemies of each other.
Los blancos han sido enemigos de nosotros, entre nosotros.
They have divided us from Democrats to Republicans to independents.
Lo dividió entre demócratas, republicanos y independientes.
When do you ever see
cuando tú ves
blacks and Hispanics stand together on issues that are plaguing our community?
Cuando tú puedes ver afroamericanos y latinos unidos sobre temas que afectan nuestras comunidades?
What would it look like if we could bring these two entities together?
¿Cómo se parecía si pudiéramos traer estas dos entidades juntas?
The forces of the powers to be would have to reckon with these groups.
Las fuerzas de los poderes van a tener que contender con estos grupos.
So you may ask the question today, why is there two blacks on the ticket for election in this state and no Hispanic.
Entonces, la pregunta es, ¿cómo es posible que hay dos afroamericanos en la papeleta demócrata y ningún hispano?
It shows the divide.
Eso enseña la división que existe.
The divide is so deep
La división es tan profunda
that the powers to be has manipulated both communities.
que los poderes han manipulado ambas comunidades.
But the voices of the black community has been louder on politics, crime, economics.
La voz de los afroamericanos aquí en Connecticut ha sido más grande en los temas de políticos, crimen, and what's the last one?
Economía.
And economía.
So,
That is true. That is true. I mean, we have conversations, Norma and I here offline have many conversations. And I propose that question here within ourselves. Who do we have in our community to stand next to the Boise Kimbers, the Rodney Williams, here in New Haven alone? And we struggle. We personally struggle with this. And I personally always say we got to do a better job at creating leaders, at harnessing this talent and keeping them here in New Haven, because they are getting their degrees and bouncing versus staying here and contributing to our society.
I agree. The problem is that the Hispanic community does not have relationship with the black community, not even the Hispanic clergy.
You know,
Él dice que el problema es que la división es porque no hay relaciones entre los afroamericanos y latinos y especialmente las iglesias.
20 years ago,
Bosie, let me interrupt for a moment and just kind of talk about why this divide exists, okay?
yes,
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, for instance, the Puerto Ricans were the first Latinos to be here in New Haven.
Dice
okay?
Norma que tenemos un momento que ella quiere explicar por qué tiene la división aquí en New Haven. Y dice ella que los primeros hispanos aquí en New Haven eran los puertorriqueños.
Okay. Now you have the Fairhaven Puerto Ricans that they were a mixture with the Italians and the Irish.
Tenía una mezcla en Fairhaven de los puertorriqueños con los italianos y los Irish.
Irlandeses, okay?
Irlandeses, sí.
Entonces, in the hill section, tú tenías los puertorriqueños que you had the Puerto Ricans that were now growing up in the neighborhoods of the African Americans.
Y después en el Hill tenía una mezcla de puertorriqueños con los afroamericanos.
And then you had telling us that we needed to be Americans.
Después nos informaron que tenemos que ser americanos.
So many of us, have a serious issue with our own ethnicity because we didn't have role models growing up.
Nosotros como hispanos tenemos un problema con nuestra identificación porque nosotros no teníamos los líderes cuando lo creamos en la ciudad.
Now the Latino community as we knew it when it was just Puerto Ricans now has changed to the fact that we now have 20 different countries of Latinos.
Ahora la comunidad hispana ha cambiado de solamente puertorriqueños para más de 20 diferentes naciones representando la comunidad latina.
And if we didn't get along when it was just mainly only one group of people, let alone now when we have 20 different folks, and just with everyone comes in with their own prejudice. We're even prejudiced against our own people for reasons of for reasons of there's so many things that we could be from the same nationality but still not get along with our own people.
Imagínate teniendo una representación como los boricuas. No lo llevamos todos juntos. So, imagínate teniendo ahora casi 21 diferentes países que como no nos podemos reunir porque tenemos muchas diferencias, y los hispanos son bien culpables de discriminación entre uno a los otros y los separan nosotros. Por eso no tenemos una unión juntos.
What I see today
Lo que yo veo hoy
is what I did not see 25 years ago.
lo que yo no vi hace 25 años atrás.
When the Hispanic community were better off
Cuando la comunidad hispana tuvieron una posición mejor
in politics,
en políticas,
we were at the table
tuvimos a la mesa
with Hispanic clergy, Hispanic politicians.
con los pastores y también con los políticos.
So today, I don't even know who is the leader of the Hispanic clergy, number one.
Número uno, él no sabe quién está en cargo de los pastores, las iglesias de New Haven.
And I only know one individual, which is Juan Candelario.
Él solamente sabe un político que es representante estatal, Juan Candelario,
who is on the state level from this area.
que es un nivel estatal de representante aquí en Connecticut.
You have a number of Hispanics, Puerto Ricans on the board of alders.
Hay un cierto grupo de ensambleístas aquí en New Haven que son boricua.
What is their plan for raising up their own community?
¿Qué son los planes de esa gente para crecer y levantar nuestra comunidad?
Bozy, can you tell us what the plan should be? How we can come together? Because I think this is long overdue. Our communities need to come together. So what is it that you feel, that you think that we need to do in order to come together and to help our community?
I do not see it. Based on the fact of so many fractions are in your community.
Él no lo puede ver porque nuestra comunidad es tan fracturada.
Sí, la pregunta era que si nos puede dejar saber qué es lo que él piensa o cómo es que nosotros podemos reunirnos como una comunidad.
When Tommy Reyes,
Cuando Tomás Reyes
was in leadership,
cuando era un líder,
there was a better relationship with both communities.
tuvimos una mejor relación entre las comunidades.
Even with George Perez.
Y hasta con el señor Jorge Pérez.
But at this moment now, there is no one leader that I can point to in your community.
Ahora mismo no hay una sola persona, un líder que él puede apuntar en nuestra comunidad para traerla a la mesa.
But I think the reason for that is because of the fact that our community now is so diverse compared to 20 years ago.
You must ask yourselves a question.
Ustedes deben hacerse la pregunta,
What are we going to do?
¿qué vamos a hacer nosotros?
I cannot raise up in your own community your leaders.
Él no puede levantar líderes en la comunidad hispana.
I can only deal with the community and make sure the community that I serve is at the table.
Yo solo puedo ser representante de mi comunidad y ser representante en la mesa.
There are those who resent what I do as a leader in my own community.
Hay gente que no están apuesto con mi posición en mi comunidad.
But we are making progress.
Pero todavía estamos echando para adelante.
We are dealing with real issues that is plaguing our community.
Nosotros estamos bregando con temas en nuestras comunidades que son bien peligrosos.
Just today,
Hoy mismo,
Scott X, who is president of the state NAACP,
el presidente de NAACP, Scott Exel,
Ben Crump,
Bill Crump,
and others held a press conference
tuvimos una conferencia de prensa y Crump es el nivel nacional de NAACP que tuvo aquí hoy.
and I support that press conference 100%.
Y yo soporto esa conferencia que tuvimos aquí en la Corte Superior 100%. Are we going to talk about the hot topic button of that?
We can talk about
Mr.
it.
Cox, okay. Para los que no sepan, voy a hablar aquí, voy a cambiar un tema porque aquí últimamente tenemos una situación con la policía en que un joven, Randy Cox, lo arrestaron hace una semana, el domingo pasado, no este domingo que pasó, pero una semana. Entonces, entre esa interacción con la policía terminó herido y está paralizado del pecho para abajo y ahora no puede por la situación con la policía. With that said, I just explained to them the situation that we have with Mr. Randy Cox and how we get there now. This is a very delicate situation because of the people that were involved. Yeah, we do have Hispanics, we do have African Americans, all of which have been suspended right now. Mm-hmm. It is a very touchy thing. My concern is that this turns into a racial thing and not a civil rights issue.
It is a civil rights issue, and we will make sure that it maintains a civil rights issue.
Entonces este asunto se convierte en un asunto de derecho civil y nos vamos a asegurar que se mantenga como un derecho civil.
You cannot treat humans as Mr. Cox was treated.
No se puede tratar a un humano como se trató al señor Cox.
Mr. Cox was treated similar to George Floyd.
El señor Cox fue tratado similar que George Floyd.
There were 4 Hispanic officers and 1 black.
Habían 4 oficiales hispanos y 1 afroamericano.
My point today is that we want to stay focused
Mi punto hoy es que queremos estar enfocado
on the treatment of Mr. Cox,
en el tratamiento al señor Cox,
on the procedures that these officers took.
en los procedimientos que estos oficiales hicieron.
If that had been a white young man,
Si ese hubiera sido un joven blanco,
if it had been a Hispanic person,
si hubiera sido una persona hispana,
would they have endured this treatment?
Si se le hubiera tratado en esta manera.
So we want to maintain
So queremos mantener
that this is a civil rights issue
que esto es un asunto de derecho civil.
we're not going to shift our attention
No vamos a girar nuestra atención
for what transpired.
por lo que sucedió.
We will have a major meeting
Vamos a tener una reunión grande
next week,
la semana que viene
and we will call in the police department
y vamos a llamar al departamento de policía
to begin to talk about how we police
a empezar a hablar cómo es que nosotros vamos a policiar
this community.
esta comunidad.
Estamos en una situación ahora que ya había un proceso, ya suspendieron los 5 policías que estaban involucrados en la situación. Mi pregunta es, ¿qué es la meta entonces para mover hacia adelante? We have already suspended the 5 individuals, right? What is the goal? What is the end goal? What do you see as beyond a stronger relationship with the community? Además de una relación más fuerte con la policía, what else is the goal here?
Training.
Entrenamiento.
We have to look at how these officers are being trained.
Tenemos que investigar cómo ellos están entrenados.
We have to look at cultural diversity.
Tenemos que mirar a la edificación de nuestra cultura.
We have to look at the treatment of different nationalities.
Tenemos que mirar al tratamiento de culturales o nacionales diferentes.
Just because Mr. Cox comes from Newhallville,
Y porque el señor Cox viene de Newhallville,
there are those who come from the cold. There is no difference in the human being. Treat people right.
no es una diferencia con él, la gente que viene de Cove, que es parte de Fairhaven, East Haven, por ahí en la línea, y toditos somos seres humanos.
So we want to talk about how we police this community, how we treat people in our community, and what is the training and what is the department going to learn from this incident.
Tenemos que mirar a la policía, cómo la policía progresa en nuestra comunidad, entrenamiento, y qué la policía de New Haven van a aprender de esta situación para crear una relación mejor con nosotros.
I believe
Yo creo
that the new police chief,
el jefe policía nuevo que va a entrar ahora, we're talking about Mr. Carl Jacobson, I'm assuming.
Mr. Jacobson,
Okay.
understands what needs to be done.
Que el señor que van a entrar ahora entiende lo que es necesario para mover adelante.
We need to dispel, get rid of bad cops.
Nosotros tenemos que salir de malos policías.
Bozy, do you think this was a pattern, or do you think that this might have just, because we always talk about giving people a second chance, even a third chance, right? Do you think that this was a pattern of these police officers, or do you think that this was just something that unprecedented?
Es un one-off. Pregunta a la señora Norma si esta situación es algo que algo que ocurre mucho o si esto es una situación única.
We understand that the sergeant there have had problems in the past. Listen, here is a man crying out, I'm hurt. I can't stand up. They continue to drag him, sitting him up when he could not sit up himself.
El sargento que está involucrado en esto no tenía un récord tan bueno para empezar. Y el señor, si tú ves el video, él dice que él está herido y que necesitaba ayuda.
Que no se podía levantar.
Que no se podía levantar por su propia cuenta.
So, why did the van driver
Y porque el conductor de la guagua
on his phone
estaba en su teléfono,
continue to drive after he throws on brakes
continuó a guiar cuando él frenó duro
and Mr. Cox goes forward?
y el señor se chocó adelante.
He then stops.
Y entonces paras.
Instead of staying right where he was and asking for AMR to show up,
Que se paraba allí y a llamar a la ambulancia donde estaba.
He drives to the department.
Guió hacia la estación de policía.
What was he taught?
¿Quién le enseñó eso?
And if a person is injured,
si una persona está herida,
do you give them first aid until
tú lo ayudas hasta
medical people come on the scene?
Profesionales médicos llegan allí en el escenario.
This is a major problem.
Esto es un problema grande
that we have.
Que tenemos.
We will not sit back.
Nosotros no nos vamos a sentarnos
and allow this to happen
y dejar que esto ocurre
to anyone else.
A nadie más. This is a national thing. I mean, this is not the first time. It might be the first time here in New Haven that this occurs. I mean, there are situations. Esta es la primera vez que esto sucede aquí en New Haven, pero esto es algo que nacionalmente sucede mucho. So, if we're doing a macro, this is a national story now. This affects all the communities. I mean, do you not see it that way? Do you not see that every this can happen in anywhere, Detroit, Baltimore, which it did happen in Baltimore?
Yes, it is a national issue. And thank Scott X for his relationship with Ben Crump, making this a national issue. And the national issue is that our community will not stand for this to happen ever again.
Dice que gracias al señor Scott Exdale que está trabajando con el NAACP a un nivel nacional, que entonces empujó esta historia de local a un nivel nacional para que esto no se ocurra a nadie más otra vez.
Bueno, quiero recordarles en estos momentos que ustedes están escuchando a WNHH 103.5 FM. Estamos aquí en Downtown New Haven y estamos con el reverendo Bosie Kimber. Él es un ministro bautista y también que representa los derechos civiles, un líder de derechos civiles. Y él está hoy con nosotros. Y además,
quiero mencionar también que somos auspiciados por el Cornell Scott Hill Health Center.
Sí, seguro que sí.
Sin ellos, esto no puede ser
That's right. Entonces, sí, esa
Y'all got to tell me what y'all saying.
Oh no, we do. We just saying that right now. We just
Station
doing
break.
a station break.
Station break.
Where,
All
where,
right.
where this is WNHH 103.5 FM, La Hispana Radio, downtown New Haven. We can find us on La Voz Hispana CT if you want to see Mr. Kimbrough face to face, because he is in our studio on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, www.lavozhispanaradio.com. And we are also sponsored by the Cornell Scott Hill Health Center. So
Excellent.
without them, this wouldn't have been possible.
Excellent. Very
we
excellent.
wanna thank you.
Let me say this.
But Bozy, also, sweetie, we need to really, because Candelario is definitely, and I myself, we need to seriously get serious about doing what we need to do so that our communities can come together.
Okay,
We
so
need
real
to
quick,
do that.
we're going to identify leadership. And in identifying leadership, what are those qualities that you're looking for that you call a leader? Le estoy preguntando a la señora qué son ¿cómo se dice?
Cualificaciones.
Ajá, para ser líder en nuestra comunidad.
Let me say this before I answer.
Okay.
There has not been one
No tuvo uno,
Hispanic or white
hispano o blanco,
to stand up against this case.
para pararse contra este caso.
And now you want to have a relationship.
Pero ahora quiere tener una relación.
The relationship should be the fact that this could easily happen in your community, but you are not saying anything. You're not standing up. It's just black people standing up at the courthouse on the corner talking about it in the church. And here your community feels as though, I don't know whether they feel as though, that they are exempt from this. This could easily turn into something bigger or greater, but we don't want that.
Dice él que la relación empieza con los hispanos y los blancos también participando en las actividades como de hoy y pararse contra la policía, porque esto puede suceder a cualquier persona, a cualquier comunidad.
We asked the question, if I was mayor,
Si hago la pregunta, si yo fuera alcalde,
I would be standing with this black community,
yo me paraba con la comunidad afroamericana,
denouncing
denunciando
what has taken place in his police department.
algo que sucedió bajo de su estación de policía.
You asked the question, and Norma, you said it earlier. You all have too many fractions in your community to begin talking about how we come together.
No,
I do not see it.
Él dice que hacemos la pregunta más temprano, pero nuestra comunidad está demasiado fracturada para reunirnos, para participar en algo así.
Y que él no lo ve.
Y él no lo ve. Él no ve una combinación, un resultado en que nosotros podemos trabajar juntos porque no estamos presentes en la mesa.
I remember Walter
Brooks.
Walter Brooks,
Walter Brooks, New Havener.
Rick Turner,
Yo me recuerdo de Walter Brooks y Rick Turner,
Tomás Reyes, and Geraldo Canto.
y Geraldo Cantos.
And so those were two Latinos and two African Americans.
Era dos latinos
from the
y
Hill
dos
section.
afroamericanos de The Hill.
And they were the ones trying to bring the community together.
Y ellos eran que estaban tratando
You
de
know,
unificar la
Y
comunidad.
por un tiempo, porque estaba Marsach, Armando Hernández, you know, those Hispanic ministers also.
Y había tú sabes, pastores hispanos.
So that there was at that time, and let me tell you,
En esos tiempos había,
because when you talk about Hartford and Bridgeport, there is absolutely not much of a relationship between the African American community and the Latino community. So we have defined, you know, a serious issue in our communities, and we need to come together and find a way in which we, and I guess it starts with a few. Somebody has to start, It has to start with few people deciding this is what we definitely want to do.
Ella dice en diferentes comunidades como Bridgeport y Hartford sucede la misma división entre los afroamericanos y los latinos, pero tenemos que empezar en un lado. So what do you like? I'm going to go back. What qualifies a leader? Standing up. Number one, standing up against civil rights injustices. That's one.
The other aspect of qualification is, are you able to cross over?
Otra calificación es tú tienes la habilidad de cruzar a otro lado
and build relationships
y crecer relaciones
with other people
con otra gente
in other communities.
en otras comunidades.
Norma, 25 years ago with Walter Brooks and Rick Turner and Tomas Reyes and Canto, they knew how to cross the line.
En los años anteriores, 25 años, ellos sabían cómo cruzar esa línea.
And they knew how to work with the black community, the white community, and as you continue to say, no one was raised up after them.
Que dice que ellos tienen relaciones con la comunidad afroamericana y los blancos, pero nadie estaban apoyados detrás de ellos.
Let me say this.
Voy a decir esto.
You all,
Ustedes,
and when I say you all,
yeah. What do you mean you all? Go ahead, sir.
the Hispanic community,
La comunidad hispana
canceled out
cancelaron
each other in the Secretary of State.
uno
position.
a cada uno para la posición de secretario de Estado. That, you're right.
You had two Hispanics running,
Teníamos dos hispanos corriendo por el asiento
and you could not agree on which one to support.
y no podíamos, ¿cómo decir? No podíamos apoyar uno al otro.
The black
no
community,
estuvimos de acuerdo con cuál de las dos íbamos a apoyar.
Sí.
Okay.
the black community had one person.
La comunidad afroamericana tenía una persona.
No, are you kidding me?
Uh-oh. There
One
we go.
person that was running
For
Una-
what?
Secretary of State.
Oh, yeah, because we still have, what about the treasurer's position? We got two blacks running there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But I'm saying you all canceled out each other.
And
Because y'all couldn't get
one
along.
race, for one race. Dice que nosotros con nuestra comunidad cancelamos porque tenemos dos personas corriendo por la misma oficina.
You know how I describe our community, and maybe a lot of people out there are going to have an issue with it.
Sabe cómo yo voy a describir mi comunidad, pero mucha gente le va a dar un problema con eso.
Now I'm also aging myself.
Ahora
Okay.
me estoy enseñando la edad.
There used to be a commercial
Había un comercial
when you could smoke, when there were smoking
cuando
commercials on
podía
TV,
fumar en televisión.
and it was a Territon smoker who would have a black eye,
Había una persona que fumaba tan y tan con un ojo negro.
un ojo negro, and they would say, us Territon smokers would rather fight than switch. And that's the problem with our community. Our community, it's not as a community, it's only what's good for me. And they will sacrifice whoever they need to sacrifice if it's not good for me.
Nuestra comunidad.
And until we stop thinking about what's good for me and think about the whole,
En el comercial el aviso dice que yo peleo antes que cambiar. Y ahora nuestra comunidad sufre de esa misma mentalidad que es más importante lo que yo gano sobre que gana mi comunidad.
The question, Norma, that you keep raising,
La pregunta que tú sigues preguntando,
what can we work on together?
¿qué podemos trabajar juntos? ¿En qué?
we have to be purposeful. We have to decide, you know what, you don't want to do it, you don't want, but let's start with somewhere, with some people.
Tenemos
and make
que ser-
it purposeful.
Tenemos que hacer algo en propósito. Buscar la gente que están en acuerdo.
It is a trust principle.
Es un principal
Confianza.
confianza entre uno y el otro. Yes, it is.
And right now,
Y ahora mismo,
we don't trust your community.
nosotros no confiamos en tu comunidad.
That's why you keep
But
checking.
it goes both ways. There's no trust among both communities.
But we are ahead of you.
Norma, you can't deny. You can't deny that, Norma. Él dice que no tenemos confianza en uno o otro, pero los afroamericanos aquí están adelantados comparados con nosotros.
Definitivamente.
And
We may argue in the room,
podemos pelear en el cuarto,
but when we come out of the room,
pero cuando salimos del cuarto,
we're on one accord.
Estamos de acuerdo.
de acuerdo, sí.
I go back to clergy in your community.
Y ahora vuelve para atrás a los clérigos de nuestra comunidad.
Hernandez,
Hernández,
the old group.
los viejitos.
And you have this new group
Y tenemos un grupo nuevo
that do not want a relationship
que no quiere una relación
with our community.
con la comunidad afroamericana, con nuestra comunidad, como dice el Señor. When we talk about I'm born and raised in New Haven. I'm a young guy. I'm 45 compared to you younglings. I look up to both of you because you are leaders in my community. Yo solamente tengo 45 años y yo miro a Norma y señor Kimber como líderes en nuestra comunidad. And it pains me because I grew up in New Haville. I went to Lincoln Bassett. I was the only Hispanic until 4th grade. I had a different upbringing than most people.
I love it.
So it pains me as a person to hear that this has been going on for so long and we still haven't gotten there. I mean, poverty is poverty. Lack of education is lack of education. It applies to both Fairhaven, Hill, New Haville. Lack of opportunity, it applies to all our peoples. Why can't, beyond trust and confidence in each other, what else is it going to take then to break this cycle?
There has to be something that you want.
Tiene que ser algo que tú quieres.
Walter Brooks.
Walter
when
Brooks.
he ran for state representative.
Cuando él corrió para representante estatal.
Okay, against Wall.
En contra del Wall.
Who was Irish.
Que era
in the Hill section.
En el Hill.
In the Hill section. You know, and I've always said there's not really much of a difference between the African Americans from Dixwell over that way and the Italians from East Shore that way. Because since they have the numbers, they control, so they don't need anybody. And it was the same thing over there. But in the Hill, Walter Brooks wanted to be state representative, and he figured out that he needed to come together with the Latino, the Puerto Rican community, in order for him to become state rep.
En esos tiempos habían dos poderes en Dixwell community y también en los blancos en East Haven o en the Cove, que ellos tenían tanto poder que no necesitaban mucha ayuda. Pero el Walter Brooks, él sabía si él quería correr, se necesitaba dos comunidades en el Hill de los afroamericanos y los hispanos para él ganar.
And that's why we developed that relationship. And the African Americans were very mad at Walter Brooks that he had forged the relationship with the Latinos.
I don't know whether we were mad about that. Walter knew how to go over here, and he knew how to go over here.
He was a master politician.
And we love Walter because Walter did what we felt was right about both communities in the city. Walter was not just New Haven. Walter was state. And there was a state coalition built back in the day by Hank Parker.
Mr. Hank Parker.
And
wow.
and that's how we got the first black treasurer. With Hank Parker. And so now we're on our way to have two blacks in the legislative government.
Él dice que en esos tiempos Walter no piensa que la comunidad afroamericana estaba contra Walter Brooks porque él era un político genio. sabía comunicarse con la comunidad hispana y también con la comunidad propia. Y también él era una de las personas que empezaron en un nivel estatal a promover las políticas para los afroamericanos con el señor Hank Parker, que fue uno de los primeros el primer tesorero afroamericano aquí en Connecticut, bajo de ese líder de Walter Brooks.
Listen, the white community continues to pick off the black and Hispanic community.
La comunidad blanca sigue recogiendo lo que ellos quieren de nuestra comunidad hispano y afroamericano.
For instance,
por ejemplo,
Tony Hart, who was mayor,
la alcaldesa Tony Hart,
who came up with Walter Brooks,
que se creó bajo de esa temporada de Walter Brooks,
and they too were powerful individuals at the state.
Y los dos era bien potente hacia el nivel de estatal.
And she remembered to go back.
Y ella se recordó a regresar
and bring Hispanics in.
Y a traer los hispanos en esa
Tomás Reyes, chief of staff.
Tomás Reyes, que era jefe de personal.
So now the question is,
la pregunta es,
where are Hispanics in this administration today?
¿A dónde están los hispanos en esta administración hoy en día con el alcalde que tenemos?
Bozy, we made a commitment that this would not be a political.
Well, you invited the wrong person.
Nosotros lo comitemos que esto no se vuelve político.
You invited the wrong person.
This is what we was trying to avoid. We were trying to keep this at a certain level.
Well,
we want to maintain our friendships.
Well, in this life,
en esta vida,
you must speak truth to power.
Tiene que hablar la verdad al poder.
And that may be the reason why.
Y esa puede ser la razón por qué
your community is not where they are or need to be today.
La comunidad no está donde debe estar hoy en día.
Trying to be friends with everybody.
Tratar de ser amable con todo el mundo. That is one of those things that I'm learning, developing in life. You can, and I think you learn that you cannot make everyone happy. And so certain your stances, your own community says that you don't represent them.
You gotta be truthful with your friends and with your enemies.
Tiene que ser verídico con tus amigos y con tus enemigos. I have always asked, and I know people have issues with it, but you know what? Because I believe a lot of times people look at the negative of Bozy Kimber, but they don't see what Bozy actually is doing with his community.
And that's what that was my questions offline before too. I was talking with Mr. Boise anterior. You know, your body of work compared to perceived negativity within a few decisions you made. Do you think that those few viewed erroneous outweigh your body of work, or does your body of work speak for itself?
Listen, everybody did not like Martin Luther King Jr.
No todo el mundo era amable a Martin Luther King Jr.
Did not like Jesse Jackson.
No le gustaron al señor Jesse Jackson.
Al Sharpton.
Al señor Al Sharpton.
But they get the job done.
Pero ellos hacen el trabajo.
That's the point that I wanted to make. Where are our Latino Bozy Kimbers? I've always said that. And when people, you know, they kind of, But no, I believe that is one of the main issues of our community. We don't have Bozy Kimbers in our community.
You just said it, though.
You know?
You want to be safe.
Ustedes quieren quedarse seguro.
And you want to get along with everybody.
Y siempre como comunidad tenemos que ser alegres con todo el mundo.
And when you make that kind of posture,
y cuando tú coges esa posición,
you will be used by the establishment.
¿cómo se llama? La institución te va a usar a usted.
Sí, y en eso quiero recordarle que ustedes están escuchando a WNHH 103.5 FM desde Downtown New Haven y tenemos con nosotros al reverendo Bosie Kimber, un ministro americano bautista y lo más importante que él es activista de los derechos civiles.
Want to remind everybody out there, you're listening to K-PASA with Norma Reyes and Jose Candelario with our esteemed guests, Boise Kimber, who's here with us, American Baptist minister, civil rights activist, etc., etc., etc. We've been here already an hour. I mean, I don't think we would like to have you back.
Yeah, we want to continue this conversation about unity in our communities.
And we need to, I think, bash our communities over the head. Well, number one is education. Now, obviously, we need to educate our community. Besides that, I want to give you the floor. You got your parting shots here. What's on your mind as we leave today?
One is,
Uno es,
when is the last time
¿cuándo fue la última vez
the Hispanic had a concert on the green?
que los hispanos tuvieron un concierto en el green?
Every other group has their day on the green.
Oh, no, we got ours coming up.
Got it coming
Yeah,
up.
we got it coming up. Ours is the Puerto Rican United are throwing a concert on the green for those who are listening, and it's going to be...
Is it sponsored by the city?
No, it's sponsored by Puerto Rican United.
Puerto Rican United
I'm
is putting
talking
that out.
about the city.
Oh, ¿cuándo fue la última vez que la ciudad puso un concierto para los hispanos?
El
Arts and
el
Ideas.
sábado, Arts and
Saturday,
Ideas
Arts
had
and Ideas.
las cafeteras.
La cafetera. So Arts and Ideas, but he's talking about the city.
The city,
of New
yeah.
Haven throw an event for Hispanics.
So
That's a good question. Like la ciudad, ¿cuándo fue la última vez que la ciudad, afuera de Artes y Ideas, Puerto Rican United, ellos tuvieron un evento para nosotros en el green?
I would love
Yo amaba
for
para
the Latino Hispanic community to come and sit with black leadership
que vengan y se sienten y hablar con los líderes afroamericanos en New Haven
and to develop a plan
y desarrollar un plan
on how we can work together on some issues.
on cómo podemos trabajar juntos en algunos tópicos. Very selective there. Some issues. Because
Some
we're not
issues.
going to agree on everyone.
Some issues.
But
There has to be a trust principle.
pero no tenemos que tener un principal de confianza.
How do you develop that trust issue? Do you just invite those that you're close to and that you know, or how do you develop the trust issue?
¿Cómo se puede establecer una confianza?
I don't know.
No se sabe.
Because there is no one
No hay una persona
at this particular time
En
that
este
I
tiempo
can call upon
que yo puedo
besides you, Norma.
Afuera de Norma, no hay una persona que puede llamar ahora mismo.
So I assume that it has to start with those individuals who are on the board of alders.
Tiene que empezar con los líderes que tenemos ahora en la asambleísta aquí en New Haven. That is true. So as your parting shot, this is your parting shot because we got to go. I mean, we can talk all day about this.
Bosie, do you remember
Norma doesn't want to
Walter
go.
Brooks? One time we had that kind of a meeting.
We had that.
We had that, but we need to
Many
have it.
years ago,
but
we had with the
but he's-
ministers and the black
But
leaders
he's saying, like
and
he
the
keeps saying,
Latinos. I
but
remember
he keeps saying
that.
that. But he keeps saying the same thing, Norma. He said the same thing. This is going to be the fourth time he says it. Where are our leaders right now that can do the same thing? Who are? I mean, so he's already identified
Okay.
the clergy the clergy and the aldermen.
Alders.
The alder two already. So we already have a group maybe of 5 individuals minimum between clergy because our Pentecostal churches are big here still.
Yeah.
We're big. We run the Pentecostal.
Yes, you do.
I
I mean, big and with people.
Yeah, exactly. So we do have power in numbers. We just are not organized to really get there. And he already said it. We got our aldermen, Hispanic, Puerto Rican aldermen. We got our Hispanic clergy. Those people we need to start identifying y bring to the table. So lo que estamos discutiendo ya por cuarta vez, lo que está diciendo es que nuestros líderes de la comunidad hispana vienen de la asambleísta y también los pastores de las iglesias porque hay poder en números.
So Bozy, that being said, do you make a commitment to bring us together so that group, so that you choose who are the African American leaders and then we come up with who the Latinos are and put a meeting together?
Tú puedes
so
convertirla ahora mismo a una reunión entre los líderes de nuestras comunidades.
Two things.
Dos cosas.
The president of the board of alders,
El presidente de asambleísta
would have to be in this.
Debe estar en la conversación.
That's one.
Como uno.
Two,
Dos.
there has to be leadership on your team from the board of alders.
Debe estar representando los líderes de nuestra comunidad de la asambleísta como hispanos.
Then there has to be clergy from your community.
Entonces debemos tener clerical
pastores
de nuestra comunidad.
I will handle it in our community.
Y él lo va a manejar de él, la comunidad de él.
Then there has to be one Candelario.
Then ese representante estatal Juan Candelario.
Then Gary Holder Winfield will come. Tony Walker will come. Robin Porter will come.
Entonces, otros líderes como
Let's start
Gary,
right there.
Gary Winfield, Tony Walker. Entonces, esperemos empezar allí.
I think we got a plan. I think that's wonderful.
I just gave you a plan.
Ya tenemos un plan.
Well, you see, I think this is
But
good.
they have got to be, your team has got to be willing to come to the table regardless of how they feel about individuals at the table.
Ellos tienen que estar disponibles a venir a la mesa y no importa cosas personal que ellos piensan sobre la gente en la mesa.
I think just thinking about these individuals, I think that most of them, about 90%, get along great. I really think this is a good group to start with to really move forward.
Ya Norma piensa que hay relaciones ya entre estos individuales y no tan dañados que podemos empezar el diálogo. So, Mr. Kimber, time flies.
Yes.
You want to keep going? Or?
No, we're good. We're good.
We took up all his time today.
Yes, we took up his time, but we got. I think this our communities.
Was good.
Yes.
And I think that what I would like to see is that you all bring in a Hispanic clergy that we can have a conversation together on air on how we move this forward.
Él propone que traemos aquí un pastor de nuestra comunidad, un líder, que él puede tener otro diálogo con ellos uno a uno aquí en la comunidad, para que la comunidad, eso es lo bueno que queremos, tener estas conversaciones en público, para que ustedes vean que lo estamos promoviendo un poco y queremos echar para adelante nuestras comunidades juntos. All I'm saying in Spanish is that one of the goals is for us to have these conversations public. That we have a platform.
Yes.
So that there's more transparency. I think that's one of the things that we didn't have back in the day that we have the ability now.
But the other thing is, once this happens and New Haven puts it forward, I'm sure the same thing will work with Bridgeport, Waterbury.
We will be a model city.
Like it's always been. New Haven has been the model city. But Hartford, because the relationships, if you think our relationships are bad with each other, the ones in Hartford and in Bridgeport are worse.
And I am in all of those places.
Yes, and that's why, hey,
and we are working.
We are called for a reason. We are called. Okay.
Estamos llamados por una razón u otra, dice la Norma.
Again, thank you all for inviting me.
Gracias otra vez.
And I look forward to us joining together.
Gracias.
Again.
Está muy alegre y está buscando para la próxima vez que nos reunimos. Thank you, Mr. Boise Kimber, for your time. very inspirational. I think this is one of the best conversations I've ever had with like leaders in my community. And personally, for me, it's an honor porque estoy con la señora Norma and Kimber. I don't think you guys understand how much influence is in this room between two people and the connections and to me is an honor. So thank you very much to both of you for letting me be part of this conversation.
But you know why this was even so exciting? We talked a lot and got the issues out, but then you
got a plan.
Came up with a plan.
You got a plan.
Yeah. And that is wonderful. And I want to thank the Cornell Scott Hill House Center for hosting, for being a sponsor.
Yeah.
Because if it were not for them,
That's great.
And before we go, I got to thank two people. One, Danny Gibbs, because without Danny Gibbs, I wouldn't have met Rodney Williams. And without Rodney Williams, I wouldn't have had the honor to meet Mr. Kimber. So this is how relationships are forged, right?
And let me thank Rodney for all that he do for our community too.
If it wasn't for Rodney, because Rodney and I, we might have a little agenda of bringing our communities together, but I think that this conversation is that leap forward, not step.
Okay.
Yes.
Leap forward.
Yes. Thank you all. Want to remind you that you're listening to WNHH 103.5 FM via downtown New Haven, and we had the Reverend Bosie Kimber with us today, a civil rights leader, and we must speak for those who cannot speak for themselves.
Muchísimas gracias por todo este show de K-PASA. Norma Rodríguez, soy José Candelario. Muchísimas gracias a Reverendo Bosie Kimber por estar con nosotros. Estamos en WNHH 103.5 FM, La Voz Hispana Radio, desde Downtown New Haven y vivo por Facebook, YouTube y Twitter. Por si acaso quiere verlo de nuevo, por favor comparten esta entrevista por Facebook por mover nuestras comunidades.
Salud, dinero y amor y tiempo para disfrutarlo y que vivamos 120 años en buena salud. Hasta la próxima.